Serena, Harmony, Aplina, and Nyx stood on the weathered wooden watchtower. Below them, the safari stretched out in a vast, golden expanse that seemed to vibrate under the pressure of the midday sun. Heat shimmered off the dry grass, distorting the horizon into a liquid blur. They moved with a practiced, silent efficiency. Two of them stood at the railing, binoculars pressed to their eyes, scanning the stalks for any sign of movement. The other two paced the perimeter of the deck, their boots thudding softly against the wood. They rotated every 20 minutes, a disciplined rhythm, designed to keep their focus sharp despite the oppressive stillness. The air was thick, carrying the scent of parched earth and baked dust. No birds called, no wind stirred the tall grass. Every few minutes, Serena would wipe sweat from her forehead and shift her weight, her eyes never leaving the golden sea below. Harmony adjusted the focus on her lenses, squinting against the glare, while Aplina and Nyx leaned against the corner posts, their breathing steady and slow. They were waiting for something to break the monotony, but the plains remained stubbornly empty. The heat continued to climb, turning the watchtower into a furnace. The silence shattered when Nyx and Muri climbed the ladder, their arrival signaling the end of the rotation. With the group finally complete, the stillness of the tower became unbearable. They exchanged glances, shrugged off the heat, and descended the stairs to walk the safari grounds. The tall grass closed over their heads, turning the world into a narrow, golden corridor. They trekked for an hour, pushing through the stalks, but the plains remained empty. No lions, no herds, just the rhythmic crunch of boots on dry earth, and the distant, mocking cry of a solitary bird. The initial excitement began to sour into fatigue. Nyx stopped, cleared her throat, and struck a dramatic pose. She began to chant, her voice rising in a sharp, melodic parody of an adventure theme. She belted out a modified version of A Whole New World, swapping lyrics for complaints about safari jeeps and the total absence of wildlife. The tension of the long watch evaporated, replaced by the absurdity of the performance. They marched forward, singing loudly, their voices echoing. The sun reached its peak, turning the safari into a furnace. Exhausted by the trek, the group retreated to the wooden tower, seeking refuge in the shade. They climbed the stairs, lungs burning from the dry air, and collapsed onto the floorboards. To distract themselves from the sweltering temperature, they set up a projector. Muri stood up, wiped dust from her palms, and walked toward the vintage popcorn machine. It was a heavy, metallic relic that had sat dormant for years. She checked the power cord, pressed the latch, and flipped the toggle switch. For a heartbeat, there was only the hum of the projector fan. Then, the machine groaned. A high-pitched, metallic whine began to vibrate through the floorboards. Harmony frowned and leaned forward, watching as thin, gray wisps of smoke began to curl from the ventilation slats. The smell of scorched oil filled the small room, sharp and acrid. Muri reached out to cut the power, but the machine shuddered violently. The whining reached a piercing crescendo. The metal casing turned searing hot, and with a sudden, deafening crack, the lid blew off its hinges. The machine did not just pop, it detonated. A relentless geyser of white, fluffy kernels erupted from the chamber, hitting the ceiling and cascading down in a thick, expanding tide. Serena lunged for the window latch, but the popcorn hit her legs with the force of a snowdrift, pinning her against the wall. Harmony and Aplina scrambled to find purchase, their boots sliding on the rapidly accumulating mound. The room transformed into a churning, white abyss. Kernels poured out, filling the corners, burying the projector and rising past their knees in seconds. Nyx tried to push through the rising tide, but the pressure was immense, forcing her back until she was wedged tight against the timber frame. The air grew thick with the smell of scorched butter and starch, making every breath a struggle. They clawed at the windows, but the popcorn surged faster. The tide rose to their waists, then their chests, effectively anchoring them to the walls. They stood helpless, arms pinned to their sides. Within moments, the entire tower was filled to the brim. The eruption slowed to a final sputtering cough, leaving the four of them encased in a solid, waist-deep wall of popcorn. 4 hours of heavy labor turned the tower back into a habitable space. The group shoveled the mountain of kernels into industrial bags, their movements slow and heavy with fatigue. By sunset, the room was finally empty, but the floor remained coated in a thick, treacherous layer of butter. Every step was a gamble. They stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, their muscles aching from the repetitive motion. Serena broke the silence. She walked to the center of the floor, pointed a sharp finger at the charred remains of the popcorn machine, then swung her arm toward Muri and finally gestured firmly at the exit. The message was absolute. No words were needed to confirm the new rule. Muri was permanently banned from operating the machine. Harmony and Aplina exchanged a weary look, and a faint, exhausted chuckle rippled through the group. The ordeal was over.